However, if an athlete becomes hot and needs to lose heat, then vasodilation occurs. Vasodilation is when blood vessels around the body dilate and decrease the resistance to flow. This means that blood can flow easily around the body and the heat can be lost. This table shows the values for blood pressure. A low blood pressure, known as hypotension, is considered a systolic reading of less than 80 mg per mercury, or a diastolic reading of less than 60. As talked about earlier, can have detrimental effects on your health. For a normal blood pressure, the reading is around 80 to 120 systolic millimeters per mercury, or diastolic between 60 to 80. As the diastolic readings and systolic readings increase from here, the health risks increase. You can see that in pre-hypertension, the systolic reading is from 120 to 139, or 80 to 89 on the diastolic phase, or in high blood pressure, hypertension stage 1, the systolic pressure is 140 to 159, or in the diastolic phase, 90 to 99. And then in the high blood pressure, hypertension stage 2, a systolic reading of 160 or higher, and a diastolic of 100 or higher. And then to seek emergency care, a high blood pressure crisis of higher than 180 in the systolic, and higher than 110 in the diastolic. During isometric exercises such as the plank, blood pressure is also greatly affected. Isometric muscle contractions puts huge stress on the muscles, and the heart rate increases greatly, and therefore the blood pressure too. During submax exercise, the blood pressure rises slightly to around 150 systolic reading and 70 diastolic reading, and during maximal exercise, blood pressure rises to around 180 or diastolic 100. The blood vessel that the blood travels through can also have a great effect on the blood pressure. As you can see, the aorta has a systolic pressure of around 100 to 120 and a diastolic of around 80. And this increases into the elastic arteries where the highest amount of pressure is, because this is where all the blood is being ejected out from the heart. And then, as you can see, the mean arterial pressure and the systolic pressure, they all start to decrease as you get further away. Arterioles decreases to around 60 and drops all the way down to around 20. And then as you get further away, capillaries, which are very small, venules even smaller. And then as you get further away, the blood pressure drops off, which tells us that blood vessels have an effect on the blood pressure. These are two graphs to show the changes in blood pressure during a Wingate test and during a multi-stage fitness test. As you can see in figure 1, the blood pressure starts off at a 130 mm per mercury systolic reading and a 70 diastolic reading. This tells us that the performer has a slightly above average resting reading for the systolic and a normal reading for the diastolic phase. The performer could be at risk of pre-hypertension. The blood is being ejected out at a normal rate, and this is the pressure that is being placed on the walls of the arteries. But the reading changes when in the pre-test phase. The anticipatory heart rate rise occurs, and an increase in heart rate occurs, ejecting slightly harder and at an increased rate. This increase in blood flow causes an increase in blood pressure, as there is a greater pressure. As the pre-test progresses, the blood pressure increases further. At level 2, the blood pressure is 142 mm per mercury over 73 mm of mercury. The reason why the blood pressure increases is due to an increase in temperature of the body. Thermoreceptors detect the increase in temperature and send the feedback to the cardiac control center, where signals are sent to the SA node, causing increase in heart rate. An increase in heart rate results in a direct increase in blood pressure, as well as because the ejection of blood is pushing harder against the walls of the arteries. As we know, heart rate increases with exercise due to other receptors too, chemoreceptors and proprioceptors, with the increasing levels of movement and CO2, and also the low levels of oxygen. The heart rate must increase, as the heart has to work harder and ejections increase in force, and the rate of blood pressure also increases too. The heart ejects, sending a volume of blood through the arteries. The arteries are thick and elastic, so can absorb the pressure of blood passing through. Nearer to the end of the test, the blood pressure increases further, as the heart has to work even harder. This is very similar in our findings for changes in blood pressure in the Wingate test. At the beginning of the test, the blood pressure was at a normal reading. However, as the test progresses, the heart must work harder and inject more blood forcefully, therefore increasing blood pressure. In rugby, the blood pressure can vary throughout the game, just like the Wingate and multi-stage fitness test. At the start of the game of rugby, the resting blood pressure will be about normal, 120 mm per mercury over 70 mm per mercury, and that's at rest. Then, before the game begins, there may be a slight increase in blood pressure due to anticipatory heart rate rise. How much the blood pressure changes by an anticipatory heart rate rise depends on how the performer deals with nerves too. A player who is new and hasn't played in the team before may have a slightly raised anticipatory heart rate rise compared to a regular player. As the play starts, the blood pressure will vary. There may be some light periods of exercise during the match, and the heart will not have to work as hard during these times to supply oxygen to muscles. This means that the heart rate will not have to contract with as much force, and the heart rate may slightly decrease. This leads to a lower pressure of blood flowing through arteries, decreasing the blood pressure. However, the player may need to run at a speed to score a try. This will increase movement, and proprioceptors will detect this, leading to an increase in heart rate and therefore blood pressure.